gerbils. They're tiny, adorable balls of fluff, but how do you look after them? Well, stick around because in this video I'm going to show you everything you need to know to properly care for your gerbil friends. Hello there, my name is Heather. I have a degree in animal science and I'm on Pet Connection International, the online service and educational channel that teaches you the science of understanding your animals. So if you want to learn more about your pets and get answers to a range of your pet questions, then subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out on any new videos. So before we get started, I just want to point out that when I'm talking about gerbils, I'm referring specifically to Mongolian gerbils, the species that is most commonly kept as pets. There are a range of different gerbil species and each of them have slightly different needs, so if you've got a different species of gerbil, you'll need to follow slightly different information. So there are 5 main categories of care that we're going to cover, and they're loosely based around the 5 freedoms and opportunities of animal welfare, which you can see here. The 5 categories of care that every pet owner needs to cover are environment, company, behaviour, diet, and health and welfare. I'm going to go over each of these categories in detail and explain what you need to provide or look out for to make sure you're giving your gerbil everything they need. So the first thing in environment is you need to make sure they're not exposed to dry or drafty conditions, they're not in direct sunlight, and they're not directly next to a radiator. But gerbils are actually motivated to sun themselves, so it's good if you can offer some sunny areas along with some shady areas. So for floor space, the recommended size is 0.5 meters squared, and this should be in a solid-sided tank made of ideally glass, metal or plexiglass, and it should also be covered with an escape-proof wire to allow for air circulation. So for gerbils, bigger is always better. There's no scientific evidence that increased space leads to more aggression. A tank topper is ideal as it allows you to give the full base for digging space, while keeping your sand bath and your water bowl and your wheel separate. But if you don't want to use a topper, you can instead use a tank divider or tall platforms. But if you're using a tank divider, make sure that you only cut off as much space as you absolutely have to, because digging is what's absolutely most important for gerbil. I've made a video on how you can make your own simple, cost-effective gerbil cage, which you can find linked down in the description. Unlike hamsters, a wire floor on the topper won't cause bumblefoot on gerbils because they have stronger pads, but because they have fur on their feet, they might slip, so you need to keep an eye on them if you are using a wire floor topper. And if you see them slip, you can cover it with things like ceramic tiles or wood bridges. Or alternatively, you could buy or create a solid wood platform for them to use instead. Plastic items inside the cage are not suitable because gerbils have very, very strong teeth and chew everything, and they chew through plastic in no time at all. Plastic for the base might be fine in the medium term as long as it's hard plastic and there's lots of enrichment provided. So for bedding depth, gerbils need a minimum of 25 centimeters of bedding, ideally 40 centimeters. You need to allow about 12 centimeters of space on top of the tank so they've got room to fully stand upright. So gerbils are very, very highly motivated to dig, so it's extremely important that you provide them with enough space and enough depth of bedding in order to do that. Digging in the wild is important for thermoregulation, storage of food, and security. For bedding, you need to make sure you use safe bedding, and there's a variety of different beddings you can use, and each comes with the different pros and cons. Non-toxic peat is what's most natural to them, but as this isn't very environmentally friendly, it's not a good idea to fill up their whole tank with it, but it may be good to give them a small space. Paper bedding is one option that a lot of people like to use, which although it isn't that dusty to start with, because gerbils like to sit and shred it, this generates a lot of dust between cleanings, which can irritate their noses. An alternative paper bedding is to use wood shavings such as aspen, but if you're using these, you need to make sure that you're providing either hay or straw or paper bedding mixed in there, because wood shavings alone doesn't provide enough structure for them to properly be able to maintain their tunnels. Hay and straw are good to provide, although they don't eat it, they do like to chew it and use it as a nesting material. You shouldn't use any soil from your garden because this can contain potentially harmful chemicals, bacteria, or pathogens. You shouldn't use sawdust or any kind of dusty product, as dust can cause respiratory problems in gerbils which have very sensitive respiratory systems. You shouldn't use any kind of fluffy bedding products like cotton because it can wrap around their limbs and cut off circulation. You can provide them with hides, but this isn't necessary if you're giving them lots of bedding, but it can be enriching for them if there's a bunch of different hides buried in the bedding that they can find as they're digging through it. They should also be provided with shreddable nesting materials like cardboard tubes, pieces of cardboard, or paper packing, but make sure it's nothing with any dyes or inks on it. When it comes time to clean their enclosure, you should transfer a small amount of used but clean bedding to the new enclosure when you change it. Gerbil enclosures also shouldn't be cleaned too often. If it's a full-size enclosure with maximum bedding and a sand bath is provided, you'll probably only need to clean them once every 2 or 3 months. However, if your enclosures are smaller or you're not providing with a sand bath, you'll need to clean their enclosures more regularly. Enclosures do need to be cleaned at some point because it removes things like food leftovers, parasites, fungal spores, and dust. It's good if you can provide some kind of rough surfaced object like stone to help wear down their claws. If this is a particularly large or heavy stone, you want to make sure it's supported on a platform so that when gerbils are digging under it, it doesn't fall on top of them. As gerbils are desert animals, they don't clean themselves with water and instead bath in sand. Gerbils should always be provided with a sand bath, as it's important for removing oils from their coats and also for thermal regulation. If a sand bath isn't provided, gerbils' coats will get greasy and matted, and they may struggle to maintain their body temperature. As well as this, when gerbils are done bathing in the sand, they tend to toilet in it, so if you don't provide a sand bath, then they're going to end up going to the toilet all over the enclosure. It's basically like people living in a house without a bathroom. So for the sand bath, you need to make sure that you use sand and not dust, because gerbils, as I've said before, have very sensitive respiratory systems and dust can cause them problems. Some options that you can use are sand for hamsters and gerbils, reptile sand with no calcium or dyes, or you can use children's play sand if you boil and bake it first. Gerbils are social animals and should never be housed alone unless it's absolutely necessary. They can develop depression-like symptoms if they are housed alone. However, the only social structure that forms naturally in the wild is the male-female pair. So to prevent aggression, gerbils should only be kept in pairs, same sex, to avoid breeding. They don't live in big groups as people commonly think they do. Naturally they live in pairs, but some temporary groups do form when older pups stay behind to help look after younger generations. However, this situation is never permanent. At some point, the older pups will fight with the parents and they will end up separating. The only stable part of the group is the male and female pair. So in order to minimize the risk of fighting, house in pairs only, unless you already have an established trio, because in that case separating them would mean having one gerbil on their own. So it's best to keep them together, but monitor for signs of aggression and separate if they start fighting. Gerbils are very territorial and don't like meeting new gerbils. Never introduce a gerbil to an already established group, but if you have a single gerbil and you have to introduce them to a new gerbil, it's most likely to be successful if they're around 5 to 8 weeks of age. The most commonly used method of introducing gerbils is something called the split tank method, but no methods have been scientifically studied. Do not house them with other species. Gerbils don't get along with other animals, and if you try and house them with other species, this is likely to end in fights, with either the gerbil or the other animal getting injured. They need to be under constant supervision if they're out and there are other animals in the household, especially predator animals like dogs or cats. Never allow a dog or a cat close enough to bite or snap at a gerbil. It only takes a split second for something to happen and the gerbil could be gone. Then if you have them out in the playpen, make sure you keep the dog or the cat in another room, either by closing the door or using a stairgate. For handling, you want to gently get them used to you using a variety of passive and active taming methods. I've got a whole video on this and I've linked it down in the description. Gerbils are prey animals, so they're naturally very shy and timid. They get frightened really easily, so it's important to give them lots of opportunities to hide and dig. They mainly hide in the burrows they've dug themselves, so this is why it's so important to give them lots of bedding. Gerbils have continuously growing teeth and can develop malocclusion if they don't have enough things to chew. For this reason, you should give them lots of things to chew, like cardboard, paper, chew toys and wooden hides. Wheels aren't strictly necessary for gerbils the same way they are for hamsters, but they can provide a good source of enrichment for them. If a wheel is provided, it should be around 30 centimeters in diameter to allow room for their tails. They should also have a solid running surface to prevent them from getting their feet stuck. Wire wheels, like this one, can cause these problems, but they have additional problems in that because of the two bars, the way they work when one's stationary and one is spinning, it can create a kind of slicer effect, and if a gerbil gets stuck in that, when it's moving, it can cause some pretty nasty injuries. You can also give them more opportunities to explore by providing a playpen. Ideally, it would be good if you could give them some sort of ladder or access ramp to allow them the choice to come and go. If you don't have the space or the facilities for a playpen, you can also let them free roam in the bath. Although gerbils are desert animals, they still need to drink water. So fresh, clean drinking water should be provided at all times. This can be provided either through a bottle or a bowl, or you can give them the option of both. You need to make sure you're cleaning these and changing the water regularly. Homemade diet recipes that aren't scientifically calculated to balance all of a gerbil's nutrient requirements are probably going to be imbalanced, so it's best to avoid them. An imbalanced diet can cause a range of problems such as metabolic syndrome, dental disease, alopecia and diarrhea. And in gerbils, if they don't get enough magnesium, it can also make them more susceptible to seizures. You should therefore provide a good quality commercial pet food designed specifically for gerbils. You should only use something that is designed for gerbils because different species have different nutritional requirements. I've made a video on the things you should look out for when choosing a commercial gerbil food and I've linked it down below. While pelleted foods might be nutritionally balanced, They completely lack variety and provide no enrichment, so it's better to provide them with a muesli style mix. If you do plan to change their diet, you should do it gradually by introducing the new food a little bit at a time to give their systems time to adjust. You should only use food bowls for wet food. Dry food should be scattered throughout their enclosure because this provides a really valuable source of enrichment for them, as it encourages them to forage the way they would in the wild. You can also provide small amounts of fresh fruit and veg. Fruit in particular should be limited because of the high sugar content, but veg as well shouldn't be given too much because the high moisture can cause diarrhea. As an alternative, you can provide dried fruit and veg, which I personally prefer to do. Dried veg you can give more often because the lack of moisture means it's safer for them to consume on a more regular basis, but fruit, even when it's dried, should still be limited because of the amount of sugar. You can also give them dried mealworms as treats, but because they're quite high in calories and fat, they should be limited and not given to them too much. I personally give mine 1 each per day. You should monitor them daily to make sure they're eating and drinking normally and that they're not experiencing any diarrhea. If you notice any of these signs, then you should get to the vet straight away. The commonly seen problem in gerbils is something called red nose. This is where the nose gets inflamed and is a sign of infection. If you see this, you should take them to the vet immediately. What can also happen is that you see red spots around their noses which look kind of like crusty blood, but it's not blood, it's a substance called porphyrin. If you see this, it's usually caused by something in the environment, such as problems grooming, excess dust, or stress. The problem can usually be fixed by addressing whichever problem in the environment was causing it in the first place, but you should monitor them closely, and if you see that the problem's getting worse, take them to the vet. They should only ever be treated with medicines recommended by a vet. Changes in behaviour are one of the first signs of illness in our pets. Some signs you should watch out for are increased or decreased activity, resting away from their social partners, a hunched body posture, lethargy, or disrupted grooming. Stereotypic digging is a stereotypic behaviour that's often seen in gerbils, and it's a sign that they don't have a suitable burrow structure. It has 2 definitions, but the easiest one to use outside of the lab is digging repetitively in one spot for more than 12 seconds. If gerbils don't have enough space to dig in, they can spend up to 22% of their waking time engaging in this behaviour. Bar chewing is another stereotypic behaviour in gerbils, but it's seen less commonly and usually indicates a motivation to escape or that they were weaned too early. You can get a printable summary of everything I talked about in this video in a free guide, which I linked down in the description below. Hit like if you enjoyed and comment gerbil down below if you found any of this information useful. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to make an easy, cost-effective DIY gerbil cage, so make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss it. If you can't wait until then and want more pet care advice now, then follow the link to my website where you can book a consultation with me, or you can subscribe to the private members forum where you can find out what the science says about your pet question. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next video.